Good evening, welcome everyone. Excuse me, to another inner hour. We're now in another series, which I think you all know, but this is the Understanding the Parables series. We did one of those last week. We're on our second one tonight. So we thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that at any point, if any of you have questions or comments you'd like to share with the group, just do the little raise hand icon by your name. If I don't see it in time, just turn on your camera and microphone and get my attention, and I will recognize you, and then you can share whatever question or comments you might have with the group. You are welcome to have your cameras on anytime tonight that you like, so other people can see your lovely face. You're also welcome to turn on your mics whenever you want to speak with a question or comment, but otherwise, we found it better to leave the mics muted so that we don't get a lot of background noise from different mics being on in different houses and whatever. So, but you're welcome to have the cameras on anytime. It's lovely to be able to see you all. So, okie dokie. So, I'm going to light the candle. I always light a candle when we start, for me mostly, but gives you a chance to take a moment to yourself and kind of collect your attention, let go of the day and whatever else may be occupying you, and just come present with the Spirit here now together for the next hour. So, Shabbat Shalom to those of you practicing traditional Jewish Shabbat time period, and happy weekend to those of you who hopefully are having a weekend off. So, back to the parables. The ones tonight are going to be on sheep, specifically the lost sheep and the good shepherd ones. So, the first one, it's very short. The first one, I'll just start with the first one. And the second one, in addition to the parable itself, I'm going to give you some background, historical background, that will help make more sense of the parable, I think. It does for me. So anyway, the so-called lost sheep parable is in different places in the New Testament. This one is from Matthew chapter 18. And it's just basically a paragraph long. And Yeshua is talking to his disciples, actually his apostles, being the 12 that he's chosen to represent him. And he says, "What do you think? If any man has 100 sheep, and one of them goes astray, will he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go and search for the one that is lost? And if it turns out that he finds it, then truly I say to you, he rejoices over that one more than over the 99 that have not gone astray. So it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven for any one of these little ones to perish." So that's it. It's in a slightly different version in Luke, but it's basically the same story, and it's pretty short. First of all, the sheep and shepherding was, again, as we talked about last week, a very, very common phenomena in their region, and something that they were all familiar with. Some of them, probably had been shepherds at one time, or at least helped tend flocks. They certainly knew shepherds. They certainly saw them all the time. It was very prominent in that region at that time. So it was, again, reference points when you're telling a story, particular parables, stories with moral or spiritual points. Reference points are really, really helpful. If I were to tell a story to you that all the reference in it were from superstring physics theories, there might be a couple of you that would get some of those references, but probably almost all of us would not. It's like, what are you talking about? So that was a very common reference. And right after this, there's another one which I'm not reading, which is the parable of the lost coin. And it basically talks about a woman who has money, but she loses one particular small coin somewhere in her home, and she scours the entire house looking for that one coin, and then gets really happy if she finds it. The idea again here, which seems, this one seems pretty clear to me, but the idea is that, to go back to the sheep analogy, that if you have 100 sheep, you could think, well, if I lose one, one gets lost somewhere, gets eaten by a wolf, gets killed, no big deal, I still got 99. You might think that about sheep, having not been a shepherd. Shepherds don't think like that. It's also not only their livelihood, but then and until fairly recently, like probably post World War II, I'm going to say, shepherds in Europe and in the United States both were smaller. They weren't the large agricultural conglomerate farms we have now. And so instead of having thousands of sheep or cattle or whatever, you would have a few dozen maybe. Maybe if you had a lot, you might have 100 and a lot. And on those kind of smaller family-owned operations, they were named. They weren't just anonymous sheep, and they weren't even numbered like we do now with the ear tags and all that on the big farms. They had names, and they knew the sheep. They knew them individually, which is probably not something in our experience, but certainly wasn't theirs. And if you have somebody in 4-H in your family, a cousin or a friend or whatever, and they're raising an animal, they're raising a calf, or they're raising a sheep, or whatever they might be raising for the 4-H fair, that's not just some sheep to them or some whatever to them. They know the animal very well. They know its personalities, its tendencies, its likes and dislikes, when it's afraid, when it's calm. They have a relationship with that individual animal. And the shepherds back then, this is part of the point of the story, and much more so as we get into more of the shepherd analogies and parables. The shepherd had an individual, personal relationship with each sheep, knew that sheep, knew how they behaved, what scared them, what didn't scare them, what they liked, what they didn't like, how to communicate with them in a way that they could understand. So that's an important aspect in what's being taught that we, I think, sometimes don't think about or don't realize, is that the divine, or let's just say God to make it simple, God does not have a group relationship with us. God does not have a group relationship with mankind, does not have a group relationship with all forms of life on the planet, does not have a group relationship with the Baptists or a group relationship with the Jews. God has a one-on-one relationship. It's all one by one, which is partly why we came up with the name we did. But the relationship that God has with me is not the same that God has with you. There are certainly commonalities to it, but because I'm unique and you're unique, and that's what unique means, and we all are, God has a unique, individual, personal relationship with everybody. And so if God knows this will get to Stephen, this will get his attention, it might not get your attention. If he says, wow, this would work really well for Beth and she's really going to understand this, it might not work for me. So you kind of get the point. It's also like a parent with multiple children. For those of you that have done that, they're all unique. And the way you might discipline one child would not work for another. Or the way you might explain something to one child would not be the way you explain it to another. The level of trust you have in a certain child would be different than the level of trust you have in a different child. And even though they're different, you might have certain areas where you trust this child more than this one, but conversely, other areas where you don't trust this one so much, but you do trust that one. Because it's unique. And that unique relationship is something Yeshua demonstrated in how he related to people, and in stories he told about how God relates to each of us. So that's a part of this parable. And another part of it is, because of that unique relationship, even if you have let's say you have 100 friends, and one of them suddenly something bad happens to her, they go astray, or they don't want to be friends with you anymore, or they cut you off. That doesn't matter because you have other ones? Well, of course it does. So this one sheep that goes astray, that gets lost, is important to the shepherd, and it's so important. Now, mind you, when it says they leave the other 99 on the mountain, again, not being shepherds in that time, we may think, oh, so the point of the story is God will abandon the 99 who are behaving themselves and are where they're supposed to be to go look for this one errant, sinning, rascal, bad sheep, so to speak. And that's not the point at all. The point is the other 99 were safe. They were someplace safe where they belonged, and they were okay there. They may have even been in a sheepfold. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. There may have been other shepherds watching over them. It may have been a known safe area. They weren't abandoning those other sheep to look for this one. They made sure they were safe first, then they went to look for this one. And the one they went to look for was important to them, and they didn't stop looking till they found it. And not just found it, but hopefully, God willing, it hadn't been attacked by a predator, or it hadn't been severely injured in a fall or something. When they found it, they rescued it and brought it back to the flock. So that contains a really important teaching in Judaism, ancient Judaism, predating Yeshua even by centuries, and in modern Judaism. It's called teshuvah, and it basically means turn around. It's often translated, sadly, I think misleadingly, in most English Bibles as repent, and Shuva certainly can have that component to it. But if we limit it to just that, we miss a lot of what Shuva is. It also means facing the right direction, because basically sin in Hebrew, chet, is an archery term, meaning to miss the mark. So when we're sinning, we're missing the target. The target being our loving personal relationship with God in this case. And sin is that which causes us to miss that. Teshuvah is a returning back to the target, so to speak, a turning back around. If the target is where you are, and I'm looking at the target facing this way, and I'm aiming over here, clearly off target. So teshuvah is I'm turning around again. I'm returning. I'm coming back. So the idea of teshuvah is somebody who's been lost, who's been astray, who's been cut off by choice or happenstance or accident from feeling connected to the divine, from not experiencing that relationship, and then often because of their own choices of rejecting God, rejecting spiritual teachings, rejecting the discipline of a spiritual life. So they go astray into their own ego, lust-led, greed-led desires, get really caught up in that, and end up causing suffering, and then themselves suffering because of those choices. So the repentant part is that people repent from doing that, don't want to do it anymore, and try to correct their behavior. So there can be that component. But also it can be just as simple as literally reorienting yourself. There's not some damage you're doing, some horrible choice you're making, something awful. You've just been distracted even, and kind of caught up in something else. And it's remembering and returning your attention again. That's also teshuvah. So that idea is really central in Jewish teachings. There are some rabbis and some Christian mystics also, who look at the whole biblical story, whether you look at it from beginning to end of Hebrew Bible or beginning to end of the Hebrew Bible, and then adding on the New Testament, the Christian portion, that the whole story is really the creation of man by God, the loving relationship that that original man had with God, the way God provided everything that man and woman later needed, to their turning away from God by choice, falling away, as it were, then feeling cut off and estranged, and all kinds of horrible things happening, death and fear and sickness and so on. And then the rest of the whole Bible being in this exile state. That's another big thing in Jewish teaching, is the exile. And that we're experiencing being in exile from God, being distanced from God, being cut off from God. And that toward the end of the New Testament, at least, there is this promise that that exile will end, and that we'll be brought back to God again. We'll come back into right relationship. We'll come back in Kabbalah and the Jewish mystics' teaching, back to the Gan Eden again, back to the paradisical state of the Garden of Eden. So it's an important piece. And again, Yeshua is using this to compare that to the Father, the Abba, which is what he calls God, and how Abba's will is that none of us be lost, none of the souls that he loves, and that's all souls, ever be lost, ever suffer this, especially permanent or long-lasting sense of estrangement from God, or not experiencing God's love. And for those of us who've been there, probably a safe bet all of us or most of us have, that feeling alone in the universe, feeling uncared for, feeling lost, feeling like no one wants to help, like no one will help, feeling that estrangement from God is a terrible experience. So this story is about that matters to God too, and that God will seek you out if you're lost, that you don't have to know the way back. That's one of the things that many spiritual disciplines say, that you can't get back home unless you know the way back home. You have to learn these secret techniques, these secret processes, these secret meditation practices, this secret way or whatever that only a few special souls learn, or only certain mystery schools know, or only certain initiates know, or only certain teachers know, or whatever the case may be. That you have to know that to be able to make the return. And this example, and many others, like the prodigal son and many others, some of which we'll get to in this series, that's not Jesus' teaching. His teaching and demonstration is that if you're lost and you can't find your way back, God will come looking for you. Now, the other parts of those parables are, you need to respond to that when he comes looking for you. If you hear him calling your voice, if you feel him taking your hand, so to speak, if you feel God leading you, then you need to respond to that to be able to make that connection, to get back home. But you don't actually have to know how. Can you know how? Are there ways that help you find the way? Yeah, absolutely there are. And absolutely they're helpful, but if only a few who really clearly comprehended the way to return to God and clearly had the discipline and steadfastness and devotion to do it for prolonged periods of time, if those were the only ones that could ever get there, not very many people would get there. So that's the first one. The second one is also called the lost sheep parable, but it's a bit longer, and it's basically the same thing, and it's in the Gospel of Luke. So I will read that one to you. Now all the tax collectors were coming near to Yeshua and listening to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes, two different groups of Jewish people, began complaining and saying, "This man," meaning Yeshua, "receives sinners and eats with them." So the Mosaic law at the time had lots of prohibitions from dining with Gentiles, from associating with certain classes of people, like tax collectors, like prostitutes, like thieves, like different different people people who touched dead bodies. You couldn't be around them. You couldn't touch dead bodies. Well, you could, but then you had to go through this ritual purification thing. Anyway, so this man, Yeshua, associates with sinners and even eats with them. That was a big no-no. So Yeshua told them all this parable. So now he's, again, as we said last week, something has actually happened in real life. He's going to use that to create a story that puts a little distance between the perpetrators in real life and the ones in the story, and then bring it back around to real life again to get people to realize what's happening. What man among you, if he has 100 sheep and loses one of them, does not leave the other 99 in the pasture where they're safe? I added that part. To go after the one that is lost and search until he finds it. So again, the shepherd is now pursuing the sheep. And when he has found it, he puts it on his shoulders, rejoicing, and carries it home. So now not only does God come looking for you, but when he finds you, if you don't have the strength to make the journey, he'll carry you the rest of the way there. And when he reaches home, he gathers together his friends and neighbors and says to them, "Rejoice with me, I have found my sheep that was lost." So now there's like this celebration of the return of the lost sheep. Also later when we get to the prodigal son story, same thing. Once the son is starting to come home, the father goes out and finds him, brings him the rest of the way, and has a big party and celebrates the return. So if you've ever had somebody in your family who has made lifestyle choices that took them into some very dark places, whether that was drugs or sex or criminality or a combination of them or whatever it might have been, and everybody who loved them was very distraught by the way they were living, and something happened, something internally in them, something externally, something happened, and they successfully turned their whole life around. They got out of that dark place. They stopped those abusive, addictive, destructive behaviors. They had a loving, positive, constructive life again. They turned themselves around. Didn't you feel joy in that? Didn't those of the people you know who love them rejoice in that? Yeah, absolutely we do. So that's what he's saying. That's what God does as well. And then he goes on to say, to draw a direct comparison then, I tell you that in exactly the same way, there's even more joy in heaven over one sinner who returns than 99 righteous who never experience any need for repentance. So that also tells us a number of things. The importance of return, or teshuva, as I talked about. It also talks about, and he does this elsewhere, the 99 righteous who have no need of repentance. So Yeshua clearly taught that there were people living who were righteous people and didn't need repentance, didn't need God to redeem or forgive them. They were already fine. Elsewhere he says, I didn't come to heal the well. I came to heal the sick. And so that's part of the idea, is there really are people who are living holy and spiritual lives that are genuinely righteous, not self-righteous, but genuinely holy and righteous people. And that those people don't have need of being saved, being redeemed, being turned around. They've already oriented the right direction. They're already going there, or they already got there. So that's something that's contrary to some mainstream Christian teachings that believe all of us have sinned horribly and are hopeless unless we, accept Jesus. That's not what Jesus himself taught. Now, have I been in need of redemption? Yes, absolutely. And without question, so I'm really grateful to the grace of God and mercy of God in my life. And mercy is something I might do a series on too, maybe, because it's so overlooked and so hugely important. But anyway, So basically the same story, but now he's had people who are adversaries to him, some of the Pharisees and scribes, or at least maybe not opponents, but adversarial in their not buying into what he's teaching and wanting to look into it more deeply. And so he's now telling this parable that why is he telling it? Because they're accusing him of dealing with people he shouldn't be dealing with. And what he's saying is, you want to know why I'm doing this? You want to know why I'm doing this? Because these people are lost and they matter to God. My Father cares about them. And so he sent me to look for them. And I'm not giving up until I find them, until I can carry them home with me, because they matter. And you're saying they're too unclean, too unholy, too whatever to matter. That's just not so. They matter, and that's why I do what I do. And if you were lost, I'd be doing it for you too. So again, he brings it back around to those same people so that maybe they can look at that in a different light than they did at the beginning of the encounter. Alrighty. I'm going to try to fit in one more tonight. This is also about sheep, but more specifically about the shepherd. This is known as the parable of the Good Shepherd. This appears in the Gospel of John. It's the 10th chapter of John. For those of you not familiar with the Gospel of John, it's the oldest and latest one written long, long after Jesus was gone. Pardon me, lemonade in my throat. And chapter 10, chapter 14, and chapter 17 of the Gospel of John contain a tremendous amount of Yeshua's spiritual teachings, and were written about the end of his days, where he was very close to being arrested, crucified, and dying. So these are really important teachings he's trying to get across. And those 3 chapters are probably some of the most important in John in terms of what was kind of the inner spiritual essence of what Yeshua was teaching to people. So this is the parable of the Good Shepherd. It begins with, truly, truly, I say to you. In Hebrew is Amen, Amen. Whenever Yeshua says this in the New Testament, truly I say to you, it is a literary device, also an oratorical device. Did I say that right? To basically say to people, hey, pay attention. I know you might be nodding off right now while you're listening to me, or daydreaming, or thinking about the woman down the street, or thinking about your dinner tonight, or whatever. But right now, this is really important. If you miss everything else, this part, pay attention to this part. Truly I say to you, listen up, pay attention to this part. So that's how he starts this parable. The one who does not enter by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs in some other way, is a thief. So now we come back to needing some first century stuff. The way people shepherded in first century, and still do, from what I gather, in most of the Mideast, and do not over here, or Europe for the most part, is very different. In that era, it was very common to have sheep. So there were many shepherds and many folds of sheep. And as I said, they had a relationship with their sheep. If you watch sheep ranchers here in this country now, they have horses and dogs. And the horses and dogs herd the sheep, because they have very large flocks. They herd the sheep where they want them to go, whether it's into a pen for the night, whether it's into a shearing channel, whether it's whatever it may be, whether it's just to move them somewhere. They herd them from behind. They get on horseback, and or they have dogs, or both, and they begin to corral from behind and outside and gradually push the sheep in and move them in a direction. And as they begin to wander out, the dog or the horses cut out and after the ones, and they cut them back in and bring them back in and move them in the direction they want them to go. Do that with cattle as well. Horses even too. That's not how it was ever done over there. What they did over there, because they had a relationship with those sheep, was when the shepherd wanted the sheep to move, because he talked to them all the time. Some people talk to their plants, some people talk to their dogs or their cats. They talk to their sheep all the time. They lived with their sheep. The shepherds lived in the wild with their sheep. They camped with them. They spent the night with them. They traveled with them. They lived with their sheep. They didn't live in the villages. They lived with their sheep. And they talked with them all the time. So when they wanted them to move somewhere else, to a different pasture, to wherever it might be, the shepherd would begin walking away from the sheep, not hurting them or corralling them or pushing them. He'd walk in front of them, away from the sheep, and begin usually singing. Singing and chanting was very, very common back then in prayer and liturgy, in dealing with animals, in telling stories. And sometimes they would probably just talk. But the point was, they would begin walking away from their sheep and talking or singing to them while they walked away. And because the sheep knew their voice, they would go, oh, and this is the guy who feeds them. This is the guy who takes care of them. This is the guy who protects them when predators come at them. This is the guy who looks out for them. This is the guy that makes sure they have fresh water. This guy's leaving, and he's going over there, and I can trust him because he takes care of me. I'm going with him. You all stay here if you want to, but I'm going with him. And they started following him, and so did all the rest of the sheep. They followed that shepherd to wherever the shepherd went. They didn't need leashes or ropes or herding. They followed the shepherd because they trusted the shepherd. There's a message in that for us now. That God doesn't push you to do anything from behind. God walks in front of you into everything he wants you to encounter. That's the way it works. So, the other part about sheepfolds, what were those? Those were enclosures, often in that area made out of piled up rocks, like short walls of rocks, just tall enough that sheep couldn't get over them. Or maybe tall enough it'd be difficult for a predator like a wolf to climb over them. But not so tall a person couldn't get over them. Usually they weren't that big. Sometimes they were made out of wood because it was much more scarce, more commonly rock. But in any case, it was an enclosure, and it was almost always circular, and it was enough to hold their flock. And traditionally, in the highlands of the mountains and in the pasture lands, typically there'd be bigger sheepfolds as well that could hold actually multiple flocks of sheep in one fold. And that commonly happened. As they moved to different grazing pastures, different shepherds with their flocks, maybe 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5, 6, would bring all their flocks together. And at night, not when they were grazing in the day, when the shepherds could gather together and easily see predators or dangers or rocks or pitfalls or crevices or whatever. But at night, when they couldn't see that and it wasn't safe for the sheep to be roaming, they would gather all the flocks in these sheepfolds, all of them, where they'd be protected and where the shepherds would take turns being on guard. Obviously, they didn't want the sheep wandering in the dark where they could get hurt or caught by a predator. But even in the sheepfold, they had to keep watch through the night for predators that would come in. Almost always, they were not predators that would attack the people. That would be super rare. But plenty of predators back then would have attacked the sheep, which is one of the reasons they carried those long staves to fend off critters. And they also carried a long crook with a hook on the end of it, so that if a sheep fell in a crevice or got stuck somewhere, they could literally hook it around their neck or hook it under their shoulders and lift it out. That was what that was for. That was the staff. The rod was the straight stick. The crook was the staff. And they carried both usually. Occasionally they would just carry a really long staff with a crook, and that would double as the defensive weapon also. So that's what the rod and staff refer to, like in Psalm 23 and some of the other places. Now, I know I haven't got the rest of this parable out yet, but this is still background. So now we have a bunch of flocks in the same sheepfold. And one of the shepherds, or maybe all of them, want to move their flock to a different area, to a different pasture, take them back home, whatever it might be. So they open up the gate. Open the gate. And the sheep don't come out. Gates open, they don't run out. Why? Because they don't know if it's safe out there. So one shepherd starts walking away from the open gate sheepfold in the direction they want their flock to go, singing or chanting or talking to their sheep. And guess who comes out of the sheepfold? Not all the sheep, their flock. The sheep that don't know that shepherd stay where they're safe. They're not going to follow that shepherd because they don't know the voice and they don't trust it. And I'm safer here with everybody else. So that shepherd's flock follows him out of the gate and to wherever he's going. And when that's done, a different shepherd starts off, singing or talking in the direction they want to go, and just their flock comes out and begins to follow them. So the gates really aren't to just keep them in the sense that they would bolt out and run away if you didn't have the gate, because they don't. The gate is primarily so that, particularly at night, they don't just kind of wander out, just meandering around. It's like, oh, do, and they wander out, and then they're out before they realize it, and they might get lost or hurt or attacked. But it's not like you have to pen them or they're going to escape. That's not the case. Okay, back to the parable. So if you don't come in through the gate, but try to break in some other way over the wall, it's because you're a thief. Because if you're a shepherd, and you're known to the other shepherds, and you're an okay guy, and you're not going to harm or damage or steal the sheep, you just come in through the gate. But if you're trying to sneak over a wall somewhere, you have devious intentions. And the shepherd's not going to let you near their sheep. Okay, so the one who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep, as I just said. To him, the gatekeeper will open the gate. Sometimes there are people that stayed in these larger folds as gatekeepers. And the sheep will listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. That's what I just described to you. Once he has put all his own sheep outside, he walks ahead of him, and only his sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger. In fact, they usually flee from him because they do not recognize the voice of a stranger. Yeshua told them this parable, but they did not understand what he meant. I'm not done yet. So the disciples ask him, I don't get it. What are you talking about? So he goes into more specific explanation again. This was the story he told them in hopes to get it of, this is how I am with you. I'm your shepherd. You're my disciples and students. This is how I look at you. I care about each one of you. I have a unique relationship with each one of you. I will come after you if you get hurt or lost or in danger. I will come for you. While you're with me, I will do my best to protect you. You can trust me. All of those same messages. And then beyond that saying, and Abba, our Father, is the shepherd to all of us. He will look out for us. He will come after us if we're lost. He will try to protect us from danger, and so on. That was making this comparison between himself and his own students and followers. And then the broader comparison of God and us. So it's, and the disciples mostly didn't get it. That's also sadly, a relatively common occurrence in the New Testament. They often didn't get it, and later had to have it more explained in more detail, and sometimes explained a couple of times before they got it. I don't know about you, but I can certainly relate to that. Okay, this goes on then. Same parable. Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, pay attention here again, I am the door of the sheep. So now he's specifically saying, this is about me and you. And those who came before me are thieves, and the sheep would not listen to them. Now who is he talking about? He's talking about spiritual teachers who really aren't genuine. The false prophets, so to speak, the false teachers who don't care about their sheep, who can't lead them to safe pastures because they don't know where they are. and wouldn't care enough to lead them to if they do. They use the sheep. They use the sheep for their own ends. But my sheep would not listen to them, so they weren't fooled by these false teachers. I am the door, and anyone who enters through me will be saved and find safe pasture. Again, this, you can trust me because I care about you. The thief comes only to kill and destroy. I have not come for me, but so that you can have life and have it abundantly. So this is not a selfish motive on behalf of this shepherd or teacher, this Yeshua person, or any genuine teacher. The motive is to help the students, and the false teachers, the motive is to enrich or empower or help themselves. That is still very much true today. I'll try to finish this one. He goes on to say, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd is even willing to lay down his life for his sheep. I told you before, they would protect the sheep, and it was rare to have an encounter where the shepherd themselves would be threatened by a predator, but there were lions, so that certainly could happen. And then there were thieves who would steal sheep, and if they came in more than one, they could well set upon a shepherd, especially a lone shepherd, and hurt or kill them. And the shepherd, as Jesus is describing it, would not have run away from the sheep. He would have given his life to defend the sheep and try to save them. The good shepherd is willing to lay down his life for the sheep. If someone is merely a hired hand and not a true shepherd, not the owner of the sheep, if they see a wolf coming, they will leave the sheep and flee. And then the wolf will scatter them and eat the flock. The hired hand flees because he's just a hired hand and does not care about or know the sheep. But I am a good shepherd. I know my own, and I'm willing to lay down my life for those that are mine. So that really kind of gives them a clue about what's going to be happening not too long after this. I also have other sheep that are not of this fold, and I will bring them with me also where I go, because they will listen to my voice as well. Now he's saying, I believe. I think he's saying, I have other people, other souls that are part of my flock that are not you. They're not my disciples. They're not even Jews from this area. They might not even be Jews. There's other groups you don't have any idea about that I'm going to be shepherding, that I love and care for, and I'm going to help them get back to Abba too. I'm going to help them do that. And I'm going to watch out for them. And you don't know them yet. And then he goes on to say, I will bring them with me where I go, and they too will listen to my voice. And one day, we will all become one flock. So there's this idea of oneness again, which is also in John 14 and tremendously emphasized in John 17, probably more so than anywhere else in the Bible, including the Old Testament or Jewish Bible. Probably more so. It's a very, very strong theme in John 17. So I am willing to lay down my life because no one can take it from me. If I lay down my life, it will be my choice, and I have the authority to lay it down, and I have now been given the authority to lift it back up. That is what I've received from our Father. So now probably he's talking about his upcoming death and the fact that this resurrection afterwards, whatever that was, and however we understand it, that death was not the end into oblivion, that many, even back then, thought it was. So that's the end of that parable. The very end of that chapter, though, I have to tell you, this is not part of the parable, was that when people heard this, many of them said, he's got a demon. He's insane. Why are any of you even listening to him? So that was the reaction of many people to what he, not many, but certainly some people to what he taught. So I just want to point out that for those of you who have anyone in your life at all that thinks you're slightly wacko for the beliefs you have and the spiritual path you're pursuing, you're in good company. you're not alone in having had that experience. So anyway, those are the three parables I was going to do tonight, or the three versions, the two versions of the lost sheep, and then this one version of the Good Shepherd. But again, sheep is a common theme because it was such a common experience, and so many of them were or had been or knew shepherds, and certainly all of them had seen them. You couldn't traverse many sections of Galilee, or for that matter, Judea, without seeing shepherds and sheep. So that's that segment. Again, I want to encourage you. Anytime during, tonight, any of the classes we're doing on this, if you have questions about what I'm saying, want more information, don't understand something, or just have a comment, something you want to share, something you think is meaningful that the group would appreciate, please just, turn on your camera and mic and do that. I do encourage that. I like the participation, so you're always welcome to do that. I just saw a microphone come on, so Ted and Eunice, go ahead.
Yes, I thought I would bring my visual aid.
Yeah, please.
This is a real live shepherd's crook.
Oh, cool.
That was used on real by me. So this is my visual aid.
That's very, very cool.
And,
thank you for doing that. That's really cool.
And I can't help it. You're talking about sheep and all of those stories, because I raised sheep for about 9 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And
you're probably one of the few, if any, others here that have had direct experience with that, I'm guessing.
That would be, yeah. Anyway, when I was raising sheep and what I learned, and having learned those parables, that I saw them playing out.
Yeah.
Of course, I only had a small flock. And yes, they all had names.
Uh-huh.
Mittens and Milky Way and and Rambo, the boy. You had to have a Rambo.
Of course, of course.
And now I would watch the sheep do this, and sometimes I was in this role, but I would be releasing them. So at night, I would have them locked up in the fences closer to the barn and the house.
Right.
And then, depending on what time of year it was, I would go open the gate up, and they'd spend the day out on the pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they liked it if I was there and led the way, because then if there was a cougar, it was going to get me.
Right. Right. While it's eating mom, we can run.
Yeah. I only have to be faster than you.
That's right. That's right.
Stephen?
Yeah. Ted wants to say
something. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, I've got a question or a comment, I guess.
Sure.
Last week, I think you said that the parables were for the common people, and you didn't talk to his disciples that way.
Right.
And now this week, it's like the disciples actually needed a parable.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. Yeah.
He must have been so disappointed in them.
Yeah. What usually happens in the New Testament is the disciples are with him when he's with a crowd or is in the marketplace or is in the temple, and he's telling parables to a larger audience. And then afterwards, he asks them what the meaning of the parable was to see what they understood, or they ask him to further explain the parable to them. That happens a lot. In this instance, and in some instances like this, he tells parables directly to them. and in hopes that they get it. But the main distinction is that the other thing he did with the disciples that he never did with the public, so far as we know, is that he would go into private settings, usually homes, somebody's home, and he would teach well into the evening or sometimes all through the night, much more directly, spiritual teachings and practices that he never taught to the public. And and though they were privy to a much more intimate and more in-depth set of teachings than the public ever saw him give, which is again true of most teachers. There's usually students that they have a more intimate and in-depth discussion with, and then people who aren't at that level, frankly. And it's not a status level, but in terms of understanding, that they're not at that level of understanding. So it wouldn't do any good to have that kind of dialogue with the teacher because you wouldn't get it. If my brother-in-law is a brilliant, I mean, like genius level mathematician, and he can explain things to me about math that I don't get. And by the time he's done explaining them, I do get them. But the level of conversation he could have with me about math versus the level of conversation he could have with Einstein about math would be just totally different level of conversation. So there are this inner and outer aspect, but definitely the disciples didn't always get it, and sometimes he used parables with them as well, and sometimes even then they still didn't get it. So
Well, I can kind of relate to them because I certainly am appreciating your explanation of these parables.
oh
It's been a big,
well, thank you, Ted. I appreciate that. I can relate. I can relate to them too. I have had
Yeah,
teachers.
tell another sheep story.
Well, yeah.
They're really, you talk about the protectiveness and so on. One night in the middle of winter, I heard a dog barking and realized that that was way too close, and a lot of people don't realize the hazard your domestic dog is to sheep.
Oh yeah.
But yes, they will kill sheep.
Yeah, they do.
So this was at, some crazy hour at night, and I hear this, and I just run down the stairs, throw on some boots and a coat, and run out to that barn as fast as I possibly can.
Mhm.
Had no weapon, no defense, no nothing but my bare hands.
Mhm.
I was prepared to kill the dog with my bare hands, and I'm not kidding.
Oh yeah.
And there it was, this big German Shepherd had my sheep cornered,
Mm.
and only Rambo was doing what he could to fend him off.
Yeah.
But as soon as that German Shepherd saw me and smelled the adrenaline coming off of me, he bolted.
Good. Good. Yeah. 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 That's another. And for the dogs too, if they're nice, I mean, if they're not wild dogs, but if they're domestic dogs, like you say, even the bad thing for the dog is if they do eventually get to a sheep and kill a sheep, then it's really hard to stop them from doing that again if they have the opportunity for doing it. So it's not good for the dog either because they can't be out anymore because they're going to go after him. So yeah.
Well, it happened to a neighbor who also raised a small flock of sheep. And he knocked at my door at about 5 a.m, and the look on his face,
Mm-hmm.
just, I don't know how to describe it. Crushed wasn't the word, but just in great distress, asking me for help. He says, I've got a dog that's been in my sheep.
Yeah.
And this guy was not somebody who was so attached like I was, but still it distressed him so much.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And fortunately, the dog was dragging a chain and managed to get it, and there was only one sheep that was injured, but just the impact that was seeing that on him,
Mm-hmm.
and also seeing the dog
Mhm.
that was in a state of I will kill.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like the red zone thing where they don't. Yeah,
Ab- Absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
That's my protective story.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for the firsthand experience. That's yeah, I appreciate that, Eunice. Thanks a bunch. Alrighty,
I'm out.
thank you, dear. So, and thank you, Ted, for your comments as well. I want to take just a moment and just have like a few 30 seconds or whatever quiet, just to kind of sit with these various things we've gone over tonight and see if there's anything in them in particular that useful that you can draw out of them or that might relate to your life right now. And I'll just be quiet for a moment so we can kind of reflect on what we've done. So just a couple of quick things here. Um, the I want to just announcements really briefly. Just remind people that we do record these, and they're posted on the One by One YouTube channel. So if you miss one and ended up you wish you could have seen it, and you want to, it'll be up there within a few days, depending on my time. Uh, it doesn't take long to post them, but sometimes I don't get to it for a couple days. But they're up there within a few days, and you can look at them if you want. The other thing I want to mention is that for those of you locally, I'll be the guest speaker at Unity again this Sunday. Their service is at 10:30, so that would be fun if you can join us for that. And then a little heads up is that some of you know Pastor Geis from Unity, who used to be the minister here many years ago, now works in Detroit. He and I are putting together some programs that we're going to be doing down here in July. So we'll let you know about that. But some of you are aware of him, some of you may not have any idea who he is, but really phenomenal guy. Just a few years ago, had a massive stroke and massive brain bleed. Was dead 3 different times during that whole process of them trying to save him in the hospital, and comatose for a very long time. Family was eventually told he wouldn't make it, and then was later told he might, but if he did, it would not be good because he would be totally incapacitated, vegetable, couldn't walk, couldn't talk, couldn't eat anything. He is a walking miracle. He walks unaided. He speaks just fine. He's resumed his full-time ministry. He's an extraordinary person. Has interesting experiences about what happened to him after he died and the coming back process. But just a very vibrant guy with a lot of insights that are not just academic or intellectual, but very he's lived them, and just a very inspirational, to me, very inspirational guy. I get very motivated just being around him. So I just want to kind of give you a heads up. In the middle part of July, we're going to have him down, God willing, and do some things. And once that's all finalized, we'll send out notices so you know about it. But I would highly recommend that, if at all possible, you come at least to one of the things. And we're going to be doing 2 events, I believe, to see him. So he's a really, and besides that, he's a great guy. He's also funny and very creative and really, really a nice person. So, and his lovely, beautiful wife is going to come with him, and hopefully she'll be at the programs as well, because she's awesome. She's really wonderful. So that's a little preview of some things to come that in July that to look forward to, and we'll send out all the information as we get the details worked out. But it's in process. And keep an eye on the calendar. Excuse me, the calendar that Ani sends out once a month, because that'll keep you up to speed on what events we're doing from month to month around here. And anytime you can join us, that's great. We hope you can. And for those of you, if there's anybody left who's never, locally I mean, who's never been to one of our gatherings, the Gather and Grow events that we have in people's homes, where if someone hosts us, we have a potluck. And then I do like 20 or 30 minutes of teaching after the meal. And then we open it up to group discussion. And those discussions, I find just wonderful. They're very lively and inspirational and informative, and everybody gets to kind of put in their 2 cents worth. And I really enjoy those. If you've not been to one of those, treat yourself, and the next one coming up, sign up for, because they're great. And we're always limited to, some homes are smaller and limited to like maybe 12 people, but even the larger homes, I want to limit it to not more than 20 so that we can keep that intimacy. And and for those of you who do come, I hope you've enjoyed those, because I love them. And I hope to see you at more of them that will be coming up in a couple months. Alrighty, so I have 2 different clocks here, and they both say 2 very different times. So I'm going to assume it's time to quit now, because it feels like it. And thank you all for joining me this week. I hope you're enjoying this series. And we're going to have at least several more of these, because there's lots of parables. I won't be doing every one, but I hope you can join us. Also, as always, if you have questions, comments, or even suggestions, feel free to email me at our 1x1 community@gmail.com address. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you all so much. And I'm going to end the recording, and then I'll close this out for tonight. God bless. Have a wonderful, happy weekend and a great week. Hope to see you soon. Next week at the latest. Good night for now.